So unlike Alex and Jim, I have no musical talent whatsoever. So I rely on my machines to do that for me. So I'm going to be talking a lot about generative and algorithmic stuff because I basically try to take the role of a drummer when I go play with other people, but I want to do other things with my hands to be ready on downbeats and stuff like that. So I really rely on my machine to generate interesting patterns rather than just the same thing over and over again. So it sounds more like a live drummer instead of just a sequence or a drum pattern. Now a lot of you are probably already familiar with grids, Mutable Instruments grids, because that's one of the main things for doing drum sequencing. And for those who have not figured out grids yet, it's really 25 preset patterns. It's 5 on the X grid, 5 on the Y grid, and how you set the knobs is which of those patterns you pull up. And as you move the knob in between those patterns, you interpolate in between them to go to different core patterns. And Emily's done some really cool stuff to make it somewhat interesting and generative. For example, here's just a simple kick pattern. Am I up, Luigi? Cool. So that's just your simple on the floor kick. But I can go ahead and change to a different pattern. Just by changing which pattern in the grid I'm pulling up. And the other thing is kind of cool. Emily's basically created what Emily calls a fill of how many beats fill out that pattern. So you can go all the way to off, where nothing's coming on. Start with a very simple kick. But as you go ahead and increase the fill, it gets busier and busier. Now you can set up a pattern like that and just keep it going, but the other thing that Emily's done in grids is created a chaos pattern parameter so that it can go ahead and wander off the beat and come back to the main beat again. And that's one of the challenges with generative music, like using Turing machines and stuff like that, is humans are kind of like expect things to resolve back to a main pattern, and when they don't resolve, people kind of get frustrated and bored. So it's really cool to have tools where you can come back to your basic pattern, but still wander off somewhere with it. So I can go ahead and set up just a simple, kick and snare or kick and hat sort of thing, and have it start creating its own variations. Yeah. Decided to double up that clap without me having to do anything with it. And you can voltage control those patterns. So that's one way of creating generative patterns, is using a module like grids. But I've gotten into using other modules to modify those patterns even further. Like I'm really into what are called probability skippers, like a Mutable Instrument branches or a Ladik probability skipper that says, okay, we're going to drop out some of your triggers. Decide how many you want going in here, but we're going to drop some of those out. So if I start with a simple hi-hat pattern, let's go ahead and crank this up. So you've heard, the boring 16th note, never-ending hi-hat pattern. What I like about a probability skipper is you can say, let's just drop some of those out. Or hit just them occasionally. Now by itself that sounds kind of boring, but when you've got an effect under like an echo, you can get some really nice interplay, leaving spaces for your other effects like echoes. Increase the probability for one. Now one thing I particularly like about the Ladik probability skipper compared to Mutable Instrument branches, it has a couple of extra jumpers on the back to change how it works. Either group together notes or spread them out randomly. It also has this thing called a holdout pattern or an exclusive. For example, if I had a kick going at the same time, normally you just have them both going together and the kick and hi-hat are hitting together. But if I run them both through the probability skipper and say, whenever the kick hits, leave out the hi-hat, get rid of the echo. So that leaves space for the hat pattern. So it gives me another way of building up a pattern from something that's just very sparse particularly if I have a nice long decay here, and I'm using a Crucible. Really happy to get the Crucible. I like its really dank sounds. There we go. Put it back in there, kicking again. So I can get a pattern that creates some variations without me having to do much and go ahead and go concentrate on something else that creates more variations. Now, one module that I've added to my case to do this sort of stuff, which ended up being like a complete bust at what I thought it was supposed to do, but it ended up being really useful for a bunch of other stuff, is Mutable Instrument Marbles. A lot of people think, oh, I can get a marbles and replace grids, because marbles supposedly does kick and snare patterns. It does. It does really crappy kick and snare patterns. You know, got to be honest about this. So let me just go ahead and take marbles and take its two timed outputs. One's supposed to be your kick drum. I'll go ahead and take the skipper out for now. Put this straight up, and let's go ahead and just grab something from my hats over here, or my claps in this case. So its basic pattern is these, which is just really exciting and really fills the dance floor. But it does have a bias control where you can take it off center and start saying, well, let's do more kicks or let's do more snares. The other thing that Marbles has, it has a bit of a Turing machine function in it, where it says, let me know how many beats to repeat what I'm doing. In this case, I've got it on 16. And then I'll throw in a variation. So we'll keep evolving the pattern. You can go ahead and freeze a pattern if you want to by putting what they call the deja vu parameter on. But I like it when it just keeps evolving itself. But these aren't the most exciting patterns, to be completely honest. Now, the other thing it's supposed to do is actually play notes. It can also do control voltage out, not just trigger outs. And there's some people like Lightbath who've done some really cool stuff by taking marbles into rings, into clouds, and just creating these random note things. So let's go ahead and set that up real quick. Go ahead and trigger my synth voice over here. Ah, yes, there we go. And grab a pitch from it. And it really does not have the best imagination as a musician. Now you can go ahead and make it go faster. Or slower. And it does have an interesting thing called a spread. You see, this is its idea of a musical pattern. Where you can go ahead and say, just play the same note over and over again. Start doing small variations. More variations, basically random notes. Or just hit the octaves. So basically, I fired Marbles as a musician. I didn't find it to be all that imaginative. But I did find it to be cool to trigger other rhythmic elements or to do modulations for other things that I'm doing. Like one of the things I really like to do is capture something into clouds. I've got the Monsoon version of it here. And then use something like Marbles to trigger different parts of my buffer. And that can create some interesting patterns. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring up some Apollo 11 speech. I got it running a bit slow speed right now.
Okay, engine stop. ACA at a descent. Host control both auto, descent engine command override off. Engine arm off.
So I've frozen that into clouds. And normally people just go ahead and crank up the density parameter. And just get these overlapping bits out of it. But if you put the density parameter in clouds to dead center, it says, okay, I'm not going to play anything until I get a trigger input. So now I'll go ahead and grab a trigger from Marbles and say, just go ahead and start playing those little snippets out. I can play around with size. Make a little more percussive of an envelope shape. And then the other thing I'll do is I'll grab what's supposed to be the pitch out from Marbles and instead let's modulate a parameter with it, such as the start position in this buffer. So I'll go ahead and grab what's supposed to be my notes, put it into my start position. And the way I've set up my case is I brought Marbles and some random voltages on Pamela's workout, and I have everything up on a set of attenuverters to make it easy to fade stuff in and out during a performance. I can start saying, okay, let's fade in these random notes and start playing different parts of the buffer. Kind of the cool thing about it with Marbles is that it will create a repeating pattern for 4 bars, and then it'll change the pattern again. So then once I start mixing that in with some other elements, I pulled my kick already. Let's go ahead and get my kick out. A little bit of hat. I'm going to go ahead and let that start creating some jamming stuff going in the background. It's still going to be generative and change its pattern over time. What I like about doing that is that frees up my hands, so if I want to do something new on a downbeat, like play a new sample, introduce a new bass line, pick up a piece of hand percussion and play, go hit a resonant garden, I'm not having to do things on the modular all the time to get variations. I've got my hands free now to go introduce a new musical line, so that's pretty fun. Now, like I said, Marbles kind of sucks as a musician. It's great for modulating. I use it to modulate other parameters, but I have been playing around with a new module, relatively new module from This Is Not Rocket Science called Tuesday. And it is a generative note thing, kind of like Architect, etc. And I've been having fun seeing what I can do with Tuesday. So let's go ahead and grab a gate from Tuesday and run that into my synth voice again, and then grab my pitch information. And Tuesday also has things like velocity out and accents out, so you can get a lot of variations out of it. And I've got a buffered molt, actually a Klavis CalTrans, which is very cool because I automatically transpose my parts and things like that from it. And have that start playing my synth voice. We're playing here. You're there. You're there. Why are you not playing? Oh, don't tell me the instrument got shy on us tonight. Here we go. Now, Tuesday has a couple different algorithms to generate notes, and if you just leave it alone, it's just going to keep doing this over and over again until you get sick of it. A few things it does have that are kind of nice is that you can say how dense the pattern is. So I can say start skipping notes. I'll take the echo out for now. But it does have 2 parameters that changes what the pattern's going to be. And you can ride those live to keep changing variations. But what I found far more useful is I'll set up something like Pamela's new workout to put out a new random voltage, say every 4 measures. And I'll run that to one of these variation parameters instead, so it will automatically change my variations every few bars. So let's go ahead and grab a modulation voltage out of Pamela. And I think this is my one that's changing only every few bars, and I'll plug that into one of the variations. So I've got it set up to play a certain number note pattern. But you'll see my Euclidean circles blink whenever there's a downbeat for 4 measures. It'll change the pattern again. So in addition to being able to do that, you've got different algorithms to create different notes. I can walk away and let it play for like forever how long and go get a beer at the bar and then come back later on. Yeah, it makes my sets much easier for this sort of stuff. And I'll just plug a module that Luigi's carrying that I particularly love is the Klavis CalTrans. It gives me octave and semitone transposes on each of my oscillators without having to retune them. So I just go ahead and say, okay, let's take this bass line here and raise an octave. Change the wavetable part. And you can change parts by semitones on it too. So that's something that's made live performance much easier, just to be able to say, let's go ahead and shift these parts around. So this has made it much easier for me to jam with other people, because I've got the bad habit of hanging out with jazz musicians, and I want to be able to play with them and not bore the hell out of them. And this has given me the ability to go ahead and use what they see as a machine, but still create these variations and keep things interesting, so we can go ahead and have a jam and evolve rather than saying we're stuck in the same groove with the same pattern for several measures. So this is the ways that I like to use my modular. Do we have the voices here? So that's some of the tricks I use for live performance. Cool. Thank you. Yes, question.
Okay, that's not a regular grid. What is it again?
This is a milliGrids. You know, there's different variations like microgrids and stuff like that. Doing a live performance case has been a real balance between how many modules can I cram into something that fits into carry-on on an airplane, but still get my fingers in there. And I've found the micro versions of some modules like microclouds and microgrids to be too tightly packed for me. So I've gotten some mid-size modules. That's why I'm using Monsoon for my clouds, because it also brings all the stuff that's paged underneath blend and brings those out as 4 knobs, makes it much easier to control. And milliGrids is an 11 HP version of grids made by a guy named Lasse Sort in Copenhagen, Denmark. And they're dead cheap. They're like $190 or something like that. And it's got several things I like about it. In addition to being small, you might have noticed that it has all the beats come up on the LEDs on the sliders, so it's really easy for me to keep a visual indication of what's going on with my patterns. So that's been a really useful module to have in the case as well. Well, Tuesday is its own quantizer. Tuesday is like a note version of grids for, you know, where grids is triggers, Tuesday is for notes. So it has actually several quantizer tables inside. You can switch between them, different scales. Yeah. Let me get some guys out of here so you can hear what's going on better. So I have to play in a different scale. And it has basically 4 preset slots for each thing that you can load and quickly go between from the front panel, but under the surface it has like a dozen of each thing, and you can decide what to load into those preset slots. Like which scales you want to use, what algorithms you want to use. And I have one of Jim's sequencers. So in my particular case, I normally jam with other people. So in that, I will leave the melodic stuff to people like Jim, and we play with the guitarist as well. But then when I'm doing solo stuff, that's when I wake up the bottom part of the case, have a sequencer, Jim's vector sequencer, which I love, and that's why I've got a synth voice in here as well to go ahead and cover melodic parts when I play live. When I'm jamming with others, it's mostly the top half of the case, and of course the mixer. But then when it's solo set, then I bring the bottom half into play. Any other questions about the generative stuff, or just anything in general? Like, this is kind of like an ask me anything. Yeah. I do not, but I've got several samplers in there, so I can go ahead and. So my head always splits off in multiple directions, and the mouth can only do one stream at a time, and it makes it really hard. There's a couple of things. One, I've got samplers, so I can go ahead and sample these lines if I wanted to, loop them, play them back live. But two, what I like about Grids and Tuesday is, unlike the Turing machine, where you can never get back to that idea that you really liked, with these you can always get back to the base sequence. They've got basic patterns under the hood you can come back to. Remember the knob positions? You can pull that up every set, but then create these variations by playing with the controls. So that's why I'm interested in that, because I kind of like the idea of like coming back to a theme, people might recognize them, go off into space again. Any other questions, or you just want to drink beer and buy modules? Well, I'm happy to do that too. Hey, and thank you for everyone who's supported Kim and myself with Patch and Tweak. We really appreciate the response. It's been really nice. It was a real thing to just like Kim Bjorn, the guy I co-wrote it with, kept drilling a different hole in my head every week and emptying out that part of the brain. And then he put in a vacuum hose and tried to suck that out for a little while. And when nothing would more come out, he would drill a hole in another place. Because I've been fortunate enough that I've been playing with these things since the late 70s. When I was a teenager, it was only natural for me to take bass, keyboard, and modular synth. You know, those were the lessons I took as a teenager. And it's really fun for me to see these come back in vogue again. But I had the fortune, to work on these instruments and design them, so I'm having great fun with them again. So thanks for sharing this crazy obsession we all have.